Good afternoon. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Thursday, February 13th, 2025. It's just after 3:30 p.m. And for a change in our action today, we have two bills we're going to be taking up this afternoon. Our first two bills that have come to us from other committees. The first one is H44, an act relating to miscellaneous amendments to the laws governing impaired driving. So we have Legislative Council and the Joint Fiscal Office, folks from each of those to talk to us about that. And we may have an amendment from this committee to talk about as well. So if you two would like to introduce yourselves and talk us through the bill at a high level.
Sure. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Ben Nobogrowski from the Office of Legislative Counsel. Before the committee is H44. And on a very high level review of the bill, it makes a lot of technical corrections to the impaired driving laws, updating language to be gender neutral, also reconciling a small discrepancy but important discrepancy between 23 VSA 1201, which sets out the violations for impaired driving, the .08 standard, and others with the civil suspension law. So in DUI prosecutions, there's sort of two parallel tracks that occur. There's the criminal offense, and then there's the civil license suspension process. The criminal violation occurs at .08 or above. In section 1205, it was phrased as above .08. So there's that 0.01 difference that is now reconciled by this bill.
So it's .08 and above.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think in some phrases it's at or above. So
Yeah.
it aligns with that. There are some, for lack of a better term, loopholes that are closed for reporting requirements to DMV. So when judicial decisions are ordered that do affect licenses and license suspensions, they don't always get forwarded to DMV. And so an anecdote that I've been using in this is that when I used to be a criminal defense attorney many years ago, we would always advise our clients that, if this happens, your license is going to be suspended. But we'd have this sort of internal monologue of like, maybe you're not going to actually get suspended because we don't know if it's going to be reported. This bill attempts to close those holes to ensure that DMV is apprised of the information it needs in order to effectuate the license suspension as ordered by the courts.
Okay.
And there's some other things too that don't really affect this committee.
Section 5.
But Section 5 does.
So this is on our committee page under Ben's name, and I think we're looking at draft 3.1.
3.1, yes. And so that's the report of the Judiciary Committee. There is also another draft amendment that was vetted through House Government Operations, Military Affairs, and maybe before this committee.
We have it and we'll post it as soon as we just talk about it enough. But so if you're looking at the bill, it's on page 21, section 5.
What Section 5 does is that it creates a task force with the objective of analyzing really law enforcement encounters in the context of implied consent. So implied consent is this concept in our state that if you have a driver's license, it's this sort of agreement that we've made that if you use our roads to drive, you've impliedly consent to give breath, blood, or saliva samples if you're suspected of DUIs. So what this does is taking a look at that concept and with the objective of trying to reduce the duration of law enforcement encounters and also to reduce the paperwork and processing load that our law enforcement officers experience. And so it'll examine a series of issues, the constitutional and statutory requirements of implied consent, how maybe some of the statutory requirements can be curtailed to still be constitutional, and really anything else that the individuals on this task force identify that are relevant to the issue. But ultimately it's to reduce the duration of roadside stops and to reduce the paperwork that are associated with them.
And so committee members, if you haven't been on a committee where people set up these groups, here you have one. And they usually name a whole bunch of them. And I was glad to see that there's a specific number of meetings and that the task force ceases to exist February 1st. We'd like them to not just go on and on
Right.
So whenever, so we really appreciate the Judiciary Committee taking care of all of those things. And so Rep. Harrison.
I don't want to get ahead, but maybe we can talk about it with James, but the per diem, because most of the state employees.
That's where we're gonna go next.
Okay.
So
I'll
maybe
wait.
James can tell us about, so the per diem is also on our committee page. I think.
The JFO fiscal note.
Yes, I guess I have to refresh mine. Try refreshing,
Oh, there it is.
there it shows up, yes. Magic word is refresh. So now we have that. So James, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us about the fiscal note.
Good afternoon, committee members. For the record, my name is James Duffy, fiscal analyst with the Joint Fiscal Office. So JFO reviewed the bill. As the fiscal note notes, the only fiscal impact that JFO identified from H44 stems from this section 5, which establishes the impaired driving processing task force. To the extent that the task force has a fiscal impact on the state budget, we find it to be de minimis. It would have a small impact to the Department of Public Safety budget. Fiscal impacts will be limited to the per diem and mileage reimbursement rates that are given to non-state employees participating on the task force. As currently recommended, I believe there is one potential member of the task force, not a state employee, who would be eligible for per diems. As I understand it, the amendment before the committee might add a second non-state employee, but that would not change the overall finding of a de minimis fiscal impact stemming from that.
And the per diems, it's like you get $50 a day
That's
plus
correct.
mileage. So 6 meetings at $50 a day, $300, if I'm doing my math in public correctly. And that may or may not be, because it depends on if they choose a retired person or a currently working person. Right. So that's the extent of the current situation. And then government operations took a look at this. And maybe, Matt, do you want to join us at the table and just tell us what you'd like us to do? Okay, so just bring another chair up.
Here we go.
Right here.
Telling us what he'd like to do, and then I'm going to decide if we're going to do it.
Thank you very much, Betty. It's good to see you all again, Madam Chair. Thank you. So
Introduce
we,
yourself.
sorry, Representative Matt Byrong, Addison 3. I am the Chair of Government Operations and Military Affairs in the House. We took a look, section 5 only was the only relevant component of this bill to our committee's jurisdiction. The only feedback that we received was from the Association of Sheriffs. Sheriff Mark Anderson came in and requested that they be inserted as one of the members of the task force. A task force of this nature often, if not always, would include them. And we found his request to be favorable. And we did not have possession of the bill. So we drafted language with the date of council and humbly request that you folks insert it.
We do. Aaron, why don't you post that now? Thank you. I was hearing a lot of concern from people about adding this. I wasn't, anyway, we're posting it. And it makes sense to have the sheriffs because we're talking about DUI and sheriffs can arrest and do all the same things, right? That the state police. So it makes sense to add them to the task force. Tom, did you have a question? You're thinking about it. Okay. Does anybody else have a question about any of this? Or no questions for Matt? All right. You're welcome to just continue to listen. I think we have your testimony. Thank you.
In the gallery if you need anything else, Madam Chair.
Okay. Ian, is there anything we've left out from your judiciary? Why don't you,
Very briefly,
yeah, go right ahead. Your first time getting to do this in another.
Musical chairs, right?
I may be just taking the excuse
So
to.
introduce yourself and tell us what you want to tell us.
Hello, Ian Goodnow, rep from Brattleboro Wyndham 9, and a lowly freshman on House Judiciary. But I am bill reporter for H44.
Recognize that.
Yes, and I am
Most of us are nice on this one.
and I'm only here in my chair's place because he's currently Judiciary is currently having a bill introduced. So he just asked me to come down. The only thing that he and I discussed that I wanted to just bring to the committee is that he's had conversations with a number of the proposed members of this study group, and they understand that either they or their designee would be state employees. So I think one of the discussions around this for the per diem would be even the state employees that are designated, they could potentially designate somebody else that's not one. So I just want to waylay any fear that there could be even more people.
We're suddenly going to have, okay.
Yes,
And do you remember what the committee vote was on this bill?
I do.
Okay,
It is it was 1100.
okay, great. Thank you very much. Any questions for Representative Goodnow? All right, good job. First time, all right.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
So committee, we should
That doesn't
have.
mean we can't take for.
So we have I guess I better refresh again. Is this coming from you, Ben, the amendment?
Yes. I could share my screen if you'd like to.
It's just taking a minute to post.
Sure. But in the meantime, if you were to look on page, I think it's 22 on draft 3.1, it's literally identical to subsection B, just with the addition of a new subdivision 6, which reads the president of the Vermont Sheriff's Association or designee, and then bumps down a representative from the Vermont Police Association to new sub 7. So
There's an order in which you have to put these people.
not necessarily, it's just how it worked out.
Okay. No, it's not shown yet. We have a slow.
It won't be there.
I know it will be there, Aaron.
I'm sorry.
Members list.
Yes, in subsection B of section 5. It's literally identical with the addition of just the Sheriff's Association designee. Or president.
It's up.
You got it?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. HAC amendment. This is the entire extent of the amendment.
I would, if appropriate, Madam Chair, I would
Yep.
move that we adopt draft number 1.1 as a committee amendment to H44.
So our clerk is writing all this down. Second? Okay. While he's getting ready, we'll just remind people though, since this is the first time we've done all of this together as this committee, so we have 2 votes. We first vote on our amendment, and then we vote on the bill as amended. So-
Just as a point of clarification, I mean, so the way that this is fashioned is that this would be an amendment to the report of House Judiciary. So the way it would work is, once that report is adopted, it would be an amendment to that, because section 5 didn't exist in the as introduced version.
Right.
Right, so just a point of clarification for the committee and some of the new
That would be for the
members.
second vote. I think for the moment, we're just voting on the amendment.
What was that, Chairman? Who else?
I don't know, pick John, Tim, John. Okay. Is there any further discussion? Committee, is there any further discussion on the amendment?
Could we put a note in there? I'll be happy.
No, the reporter can say something about that. Tom, do you have a question?
Yes, the effective date is July 1, 2025. And I'm just curious to know why not upon passage?
There was no reason, July 1st, 2025 is our typical default language, and there was no discussion on the effective date.
It strikes, if this is, I know it's important. And so don't take this person, but if this was like front burner, it's the first bill we've dealt with, here it is, ready to go, you know, the third or fourth or fifth bill on the floor. There's de minimis financial impact.
So this would be a question for judiciary. So Ian, you can just talk from there since you've already introduced yourself. Did you talk about effective dates?
And this is just for section 5?
No.
No, the whole bill.
I think if we discussed effective dates for this bill, or I believe we did have some testimony about it that alleged counsel kind of went very briefly through this bill, but there are some fairly extensive changes that are going to come, especially for the blood warrant for blood tests and a refusal, and so there might be some time needed to for the judiciary and for prosecutors to take on these changes, and so effective immediately upon passage, versus giving them some time to onboard it. There was some discussion about that.
Okay, I mean, I'm paying attention to the task force.
Oh, well, I was.
Right, I mean, I'm just, that's fine, it's just struck me as I'm paying attention to the task force, that
The
it's
task
like.
force might be able to start early. Sometimes you can have multiple.
So, and then I think to answer, if I may,
Yeah,
we didn't have any testimony about having the task force start right
Okay.
upon passage, and we could have that discussion.
I think we'll-
It'll come, I mean, if it's important enough, it'll be dealt with in the Senate.
Senate,
on this
right. The
case,
Senate
but-
can always do that.
And right now, the way it's proposed is that they have to meet on or before August 1st. So it does kind of give that month leeway. So there might, that's a discussion that can be had, but right now, based on the bill, it's kind of structured based off of the effective date itself.
Yeah, because I mean, these folks here are available now. People in the task force to talk about the changes. The technical piece is fine, yeah, but
So we'll just go with what judiciary wanted but it's a good point to make. All right, there being no further discussion, let's have the clerk call the roll.
Representative Blumenle,
Yes.
Representative Dickinson,
Yes.
Representative Harrison.
Yes.
Representative Consenta,
Yes.
Representative LaRoche. Yes. Representative Rowicki.
Yes.
Micro.
Yes.
Representative Sproy, yes. Representative Stevens,
yeah.
Representative Yakuboni. Yeah. Representative Shy,
Yes.
11-0.
So that's on the amendment. And now what we'd like to do is make a motion to approve the report. Let me get this wrong, Ben. The report of the Committee on Judiciary as amended.
Sounds good.
Okay. So do I have a motion to? That's good.
I'll make the motion that we accept the report as amended.
Okay. Is there a second? Flourish. Any further discussion? Okay, so when the clerk is ready, let's call the roll.
Representative Blumenle,
Yes.
Representative Dickinson,
Yes.
Representative Harrison.
Yeah.
Representative Consent,
Yes.
get that right yet. Representative LaRoche. Representative Rowicki,
Yes.
Representative Nigro,
Yes.
Representative Squirrel, yes. Representative Stevens.
Yes.
Yakuboni. Yeah. And Representative Shaw.
Yes.
11-0.
Here, so feel free to report back to your committee. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, James. Nice to see you, meet you.
Nice to see you. Nice to meet all of you. I'm sure I will see you again soon.
Didn't even introduce me.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you.
We'll invite you back when Mark Hernandez gets up.
Oh, okay. Might be more contentious at that point.
Okay, so. Yes, ma'am. Okay, I'll text you. You can text me. Yeah, okay. So we are supposed to start the next,
There you
we have everybody, we don't have everybody here though. Oh, we have everybody here? What do you think, Erin? Do we have to just re-put time because we said 4:00?
I can update it.
Okay.
I can start now.
If everybody's ready, let's start now. Is that a? Things like, why keep us waiting or keep you waiting? Sure. Come join the party.
Am I there?
No one's going.
Did you join us?
So we're not seeing a fiscal note because that's another discussion. We have the as introduced, but then we also have the Human Services Committee report 1100. I expect that's the one we need to look at.
Yes, it's a strikeout.
Okay. So if you would all like to introduce yourselves for the record, and then we can discuss H13.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dan Noyes. I serve on the Human Services Committee and represent Woolkit, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Belvedere.
For the record, Noel Mangel, the joint fiscal.
And Jen Carby from the Office of Legislative Counsel.
Have you met everybody at this table, Jen?
Almost, yes? I think so, or at least they've been around.
Everybody feel like she's yours. Okay.
I don't know very well.
Great. So do you want to walk us through the bill?
Sure, are you put the language up on the screen, committee, or look at it on your own device, committee?
I think, does everybody have a copy of it on their screen? It looks like everybody's got a copy, so we'll go that way.
Okay, so we are looking at H13. We're looking at the House Human Services recommendation of a strike all amendment on H13, which is currently titled an act relating to Medicaid payment rates for home and community-based service providers and designated and specialized service agencies.
Short little.
It gets a little shorter by the end because not because the scope has changed, but just because we've included the latter group in with the larger definition of the former. So it starts out in section 1, amending 33 VSA section 900, which is in the Agency of Human Services rate setting statutes in Title 33. And there is a list of definitions. So we're first just cleaning up the lead in language to be more consistent with how we typically introduce definitions. And then it adds a new definition of the term home and community-based services for purposes of this chapter, which would mean the following services provided pursuant to Vermont's Global Commitment to Health, Section 1115 Medicaid demonstration. Sometimes people just refer to as Medicaid waiver or Global Commitment, or a successor program. So the following services, when they are provided pursuant to our Medicaid program: long-term services and supports provided to older adults and adults with disabilities in a home or community setting other than a nursing home, including enhanced residential services, home health and hospice services, adult day rehabilitation services, and assistive community care services, and short and long-term services and supports provided to individuals with mental conditions, individuals with substance use disorders, individuals with developmental or intellectual disabilities, and individuals with a brain injury in a home or community setting for which the Medicaid rates are not otherwise established pursuant to statute or rule. That's our umbrella, at least for the purposes of this chapter, of what we're referring to as home and community-based services. And then we add in section 2, a new section in that chapter on payment rates for providers of home and community-based services. And this directs the Secretary of Human Services to determine payment rates for the providers of home and community-based services that are reasonable and adequate to achieve the required outcomes for the populations they serve. And I'll just pause here to say, you'll see when we get to section 3, but this language is modeled on some existing language in Title 18 around the designated and specialized services agencies that for various reasons has not been implemented as perhaps was expected. So this brings those designated and specialized service agencies into the definition we're using of home and community-based services, and then directs the Secretary of Human Services to determine their payment rates. When determining the payment rates, the Secretary must adjust the rate amounts to take into account factors that include, first, the reasonable cost of any governmental mandate that has been enacted, adopted, or imposed by any state or federal authority, and a cost adjustment factor to reflect changes in reasonable costs of goods to and services of providers of home and community-based services, including those attributed to inflation and labor market dynamics. And when determining the reasonable and adequate rates of payment for the providers, the Secretary may, so the first one was a shall, Secretary may consider geographic differences in wages, benefits, housing, and real estate costs in each region of the state. And it directs the Secretary to establish a methodology for determining payment rates for these providers in accordance with this section. And it specifies one has to go into the methodology. It must provide a schedule for conducting rate studies or studies of the Medicaid reimbursement rates, but rate studies paid to the providers of home and community-based services, including the rates adequacy and their underlying methodologies that includes studying the rates paid to providers for each type of service at least once every 5 years. Methodology must set forth a predictable timeline for redetermination of base rates, include a process for determining an annual inflationary rate adjustment to the extent permitted by the federal government, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, take into account the financial needs of providers whose reimbursement may be negatively affected by client absences, and must use Vermont labor market rates and Vermont costs of operation. It also directs the secretary to establish a process by which a provider whose financial condition places it at imminent risk of closure may seek extraordinary financial relief from the agency, which is a process that exists for nursing homes already.
Right, okay.
And then
We're just expanding it to other places, not just the nursing homes.
well, right, and then in E, the secretary would redetermine the payment rates for providers, these providers at least annually, and report those rates and the amounts necessary to fund them to this committee and to other committees of jurisdiction annually as part of their budget presentation. So that's really where this committee comes in. Yep.
We're getting a report.
Be all this information provided about what the rates, according to the Secretary of Human Services, should be, and then what it would cost to pay that. Section 3 amends the existing language I talked about in Title 18 around rates of payment to the designated and specialized service agencies. Under existing law, the Secretary of Human Services says shall have sole responsibility for establishing. This makes that a more active requirement that they determine the Department of Health's, of Mental Health, and of Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living's rates of payments for designated and specialized service agencies. And now we just point to the new section we created in Section 2. So in accordance with 33 VSA Section 911, instead of having parallel processes.
Consistent language.
Right. So right. So as the bill was introduced, it had parallel processes that used the same language, had the designated and specialized service agencies in Title 18 and other types of providers in Title 33. And this just puts them together in Title 33, but keeps that reference at least in Title 18 to say, there's the place where these providers' rates are determined. And then Section 4 is an implementation report. So this would have by January 15th of 2026, the agency reporting to the House Committees on Human Services and on Healthcare and Senate Committee on Health and Welfare, an update of how they're implementing that new requirement around the methodology and determination of rates, including the agency's proposed schedule for doing the Medicaid rate studies and the methodology that the agency developed for determining payment rates for providers. And it would take effect on passage, and then we would amend the title to just say an act relating to Medicaid payment rates for home and community-based service providers.
And Dan, what was the vote out of the committee?
11-0-0.
So are there questions about this? Yes, Representative Boni.
Just to clarify, so next January, would the agency say, based on our report, here's what the rate should be?
Next January, they will be providing you with an update on how they're doing and coming up with this. And yes, they should be providing information as part of their budget presentation. So perhaps later in January or February about what it would be, what the rates would be and the amounts necessary to fund them.
Okay. So it's
But
clear.
it's possible that when they come back in January, they will say, we're still working on doing these studies and we are only going to have partial information for you this year.
So just to jump in real quick, there's no fiscal note because the bill does not require the rate increases. It requires the study, it requires the processes for determining, but it doesn't actually increase the rates. So I wasn't sure whether I'd do a fiscal note on this or not. I may just do a fiscal note saying that there's no appropriation required based on the language. The other thing I will flag though is the bill also requires HS to establish a process for providers whose financial condition places them at risk of closure to seek extraordinary financial relief from AHS. So it has a process for them to seek it, but it doesn't provide money for AHS to grant it.
Right.
So, and the process that the agency determines will drive whether they need an appropriation, right? So if they say, oh, if you provide it, then we have to fulfill it versus, or I think the language, the devil's in the detail of what that process they determine will require, but there's no appropriation to actually, if someone seeks it, doesn't mean they get it. And so there's no appropriation or requirement that the agency provide relief, even if it's sought. Does that make sense?
So I have Rep. Dickinson, Rep. Stevens, and Rep. Yakavani.
Yeah, can you define what a specialized service is? Is that?
Designated and specialized service agencies. The specialized service agencies are typically the ones, I believe, providing supports to individuals with developmental disabilities in the community.
Okay, so like the IDD housing initiative, would this apply to them?
I'm not familiar with that.
They're not an SSA.
They would,
I don't think so.
it has that designation
Yes,
through the state to be able,
Right.
to provide those services.
Okay.
I can look.
I don't think.
Yeah.
Rep. Stevens?
Nolan, on that point that you just talked about, were there funds specifically available for the nursing homes that we just dealt with in the BAA, or did we have to grant that money through the BAA because of a request from, in this case, the administration?
My understanding is that was the BAA ask, and I don't believe it.
So whenever this goes into full effect, if an agency or if somebody had to apply for that, they'd do it the same way, go to AHS and say, we need help, and then AHS would make a decision, again, just the way they did for BAA.
Yeah, that is my understanding.
And then in terms of the fiscal note, I think you're right. I don't think this is saying that. I think this is just establishing a piece of paper that says the rates shall be or should be this. And then it has to go through a standard budgeting process in order to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
We've done some of this before.
Yeah.
But it will show what the rates should be in order to do this.
But the shall is about setting the rate, not paying for the
Right.
rate. Yeah.
Exactly. Rep. Yakavani?
So my first question was Tom's, saying it is like nursing homes, and Nolan is right, doesn't compel them to fund it. But my second question is, why not remove any possible doubt and say, by next year, you shall tell us what the rates would be, not what they shall be, but because we make that decision, what the rates would be. It sounds like you mentioned, Jen, they might come back and say, oh, we didn't get to it.
Well, I mean, I think the language says they should. I'm not sure from a timing standpoint, especially because some of these require a rate study, that they will be ready to tell you for all of the provider types.
Did they testify on this?
Yes.
Yes.
And what did they say?
Well, they
They do
are.
2 to 3 types, right?
Yeah.
2 to 3 provider types they can do a rate study on per year. And I think they have recently done some, so they may be able to provide the information from the provider types they have studied recently and the ones they will do as a result of this legislation as they build their schedule. But part of what they're going to be coming back to tell you is what the schedule is going to be.
So I often think of this as a kind of a tool for the Human Services Committee as we take testimony on the budget or the BAA, where, we're being asked to provide additional funding in our letter to the Appropriations Committee, and will give us a tool to really look at to see where our limited funds are best utilized to make sure that we're not trying to pick up a failed agency. If we can look at it and say, oh, this one's really bad, we're going to need to make some investments here. We'll have that data to be able to look at that and make those recommendations based on some accountability to the rate study that says, hey, you've underfunded this, or maybe it's a portion of it and we try to pick up a couple of them. It will also help you out.
Rep. Dickinson?
Yeah, I'm going to be going to show my ignorance here, but an SSA, you say that's for developmental disabilities at home or in the community? I mean, what exactly? Can you define an
So I
SSA a
can,
little more?
well, I can tell you, so I'm looking right now at the Department of Disabilities, Aging and Independent Living's Developmental Disability Services Division, and they describe the Specialized Service Agency, or SSA, as an organization contracted by Dale that provides developmental disability services through either a distinctive approach to service delivery and coordination or to meet distinctive individual needs. There are 5 SSAs listed: Champlain Community Services, Families First, Green Mountain Support Services, Lincoln Street Incorporated, and Specialized Community Care.
Okay, so we did pilots through that the university, that the Agency of Human Services did, and we did put money in the BAA for a third pilot for the.
Those were housing. That was different than
Housing.
the next.
However, you really can't separate the housing from the needs of the people that they're trying to serve. I mean, there were different modules or different types of things provided in each of those pilots, from what I understand.
And some individuals might receive services through these agencies in their parents' home or
Yes.
in a home of someone who we're asking to house these individuals. Or it might be, in that case, like a congregate housing setting where there's.
We're one of these pilots.
Correct. Mhm.
So when do they become, when does the determination go from being a pilot to being an SSA? Or is that something that would need to
An
develop?
SSA is
Is
an
a-
entity
yeah.
with whom the state contracts to provide certain services that otherwise the state would be providing
Right.
itself.
Be like a home health agency or, a
Yeah,
standalone
yeah,
agency
yeah.
that's providing the services in the home or in the community.
So is the state, just to go back to this, clarify this.
Yeah.
So in these pilots, is the state running those, or is that something that they're contracting with other people?
I believe they are contracting.
Okay.
Not familiar with the pilots, I'm sorry.
We did have a good presentation on the SSAs and EA, all of the different agencies.
That's on your committee page.
That I'm happy to make
Yeah,
sure you have
okay.
a link to.
Yeah.
It was good.
Great.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So
I'm just trying to clarify what I
Vermont Care
think
Partners
Yeah, Vermont Care
represents
Partners.
both the DAs and the SSAs, and so Amy Johnson's been in the building a lot and could talk to you about
Okay, thank you.
what they do.
So many pieces.
Hmm.
All right, are there any other questions about this bill? So there's no money. And it was 11-0 in the Human Services Committee. And it came to us because we're getting a report. And there.
Because you're getting the report, yes, and I think there will be, there will be information presented that will be probably in the context of requesting
Right.
additional rate increases, whether from the agency itself or from the providers, and this will give you more information.
To do that. So
May
there's-
create
So
expectations
there's
as well.
no money in, no general fund, no money in the FY 26 budget. I'm just sort of making sure everybody understands that that's where we are. So it's kind of nice to have a couple of bills that are coming through that we don't have to worry about our budget.
And honestly, we didn't think it was coming here.
If our name is in the bill, it comes.
I saw us running down here. I was,
I know.
I was like, oh, there's no bill coming.
Let me just check with Tips in a meeting if she wants to come back and vote. So if there aren't any other questions, I would entertain a motion to bill as, how do we want to
As
say this?
recommended by the Committee on Human Services.
Recommended by the Committee on Human Services. And looks like Tom is seconding. Let me just check Tiff quickly. You can come out.
We'll make a motion.
Rep Yakavani. Do you want to come or not? My spelling was not working. It couldn't. Actually, if I wanted to close on the house. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion about the bill? Why don't we take a vote and then I'll just see if we hear from Tiff and.
Okay, Representative Dickinson,
Yes.
Representative Harrison,
Yes.
Representative Consenka,
Yes.
Representative LaRoche?
Yes.
Representative Norwicki?
Yes.
Representative Nigro?
Yes.
Representative Squirrel, yes. Representative Stevens?
Yes.
Representative Yakavoni?
Yes.
Representative Shy?
Yes.
Okay, 10-0-1.
We may give her 5 minutes, but then we'll close the vote and you all are free to go. Thank you for coming. Yeah.
Will this be on the floor tomorrow or?
We go on notice, right?
Notice.
Thursday, Friday?
Yeah.
Yes, if you get it to the clerk.
It will be, so it'll be on Tuesday.
All right.
Okay,
So
just
we'll
trying
leave
to-
it at 0-1, it's in the middle of the meeting. So you can tell your committee. to
Ready to do
0-1.
it.
And the reporter of the bill would be Dave. Right? Yeah. Your area?
I forget it would be.
Yeah, okay, good. I wasn't sure whether you were hesitating on that or not.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you to our West Council. Hey, JFO friend.
Yes.
You do it, Jeff.
So
Thank
for
you.
those who are reporting bills, so Dave and Trevor. Dave, Trevor's gonna send you something and you need to send it to the clerk tonight, as soon as he sends you whatever he's gonna send you. So you aren't, because they're gonna sit in their office and wait, and if you forget, they're gonna sit in their office and wait.
Really?
That's for everybody to know, when we vote out a bill and you're the person reporting, you gotta get it to the clerks.
Do I say anything to him or just say, here you go?
No.
Trevor will send you something as to what you're
Okay.
supposed to do. So I think,
It's a little different now too, being there or there. Oh, no, the clerk, you're right, I'm sorry.
no, it's clerk.
The initial introduction.
Okay. So committee, tomorrow, we're starting at 9. We have the legislative budget. And then we have BGS and the Secretary of State's office and Vermont Community Broadband Board. We have nothing in the afternoon.
So, Madam Chair.
Currently have, meetings.
We have one thing. I guess I haven't updated mine, but I think we will not till late afternoon on Friday.
Tomorrow's the group of pages last day. Do we go be on the floor with them for that?
If the legislative budget doesn't take an hour, we should be able to be on the floor. And I don't think it'll take an hour. We'll just let them know we're gonna try to get to the floor, but thanks you. It's already been 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I know, right?
I'm gonna go.
We have a lot of work to do, you guys. All right, let's go offline. Thank you.